This video talks about working with the Vendor Center. If you've already watched the video on the Customer Center, this will seem like déjà vu. So let's get started. Click the Vendors button on the home page. On the left side of the Vendor Center are two tabs, Vendors and Transactions. When you select a vendor on the Vendors tab, the right side of the Vendor Center shows the information specific to that vendor. And just like the Customer Center, you can filter what the vendors list shows by choosing one of these options. And just like the Customer Center, you can expand the list to fill the full screen. And click it again to go back. You can type a word or phrase. So I'll type the name of a town and click the search icon, and this filters the list to only those in that town. And click the X to go back to the full list. And you'll notice some icons up at the top here. Click New Vendor to add a new vendor. You could create new vendor transactions such as bills, purchase orders, and so on. You can print, you can export, and you can open Word to create letters. Now I'll show you a couple of things you can do working with vendor records. So let's click a new vendor here, and it's very similar to the Customer Center. You've got the little pencil edit icon, and click it to make changes to the vendor. You can make changes on any of the tabs. Let's go ahead and close that, and you can attach documents to this vendor record. There are links to reports for this vendor. And then there's this button you can click to order checks. So the Transaction tab shows all the transactions with this vendor. And you can filter the list by choosing the options from these menus. Choose the date range. You could also create new transactions from here. Click the Manage Transactions menu, and you can create new transactions for this vendor. Contacts tab is where you can add new contacts to the company. You could also edit them and delete them. You can add to-do items for a vendor. I love to-do items. They help keep me organized and less stressed. So for a vendor, you could create a to-do item to remind you when to expect a delivery or to call them for a special order. On the day the to-do item is due, QuickBooks will remind you if you open QuickBooks that day and look at the company to-do list. Quickly show you that. Go to the company menu and choose to-do list. You can also generate a report of your to-do items, and you can print that out. Launch to-do report. And the Notes tab will show any notes you've created for this vendor. If you go to Manage Notes, you can add a new note, and the notepad appears. If you want to keep track of the date of the note, just click Date Timestamp, and QuickBooks enters the date and time. And then you can type your note. New Meyer lemon trees expected next week. If you want to be reminded of a to-do item, you can create a new to-do item from here. And I want to set up a call. I'll make the priority medium. And if I wanted to select a time, I could click this checkbox, and that activates the time fields. So why don't I make it let's make it 1:30. And not in the morning. Typing the details is required, or you can't save the to-do item. Call next week to see if my trees arrived. Okay, click OK to save the to-do item. And click OK again to save the note. And now you can see the note is on the Notes tab, and the to-do item is on the To-Do tab. So now let's talk about this Transactions tab. It lists all your transactions by type across all your vendors. So they're purchase orders, if you've turned on the inventory feature, item receipts, bills, bill payments, checks, credit card activity, and sales tax payments. So when you select a transaction type on the left, QuickBooks lists all the transactions of that type across all your vendors. And you can filter that list of transactions. Let's say overdue bills. So that's not too bad, there are only 4. And you can change the date range. Let's go back to all bills. And you could change the sort of the list by clicking on a column heading. So clicking on aging might be a useful thing because you could see the oldest bills and you know which ones to pay first. And open balance might be a good one too. You can open a transaction directly here by double-clicking it. Let's just go ahead and close that. And up on top here are similar icons: create a new vendor, create transactions, print, and QuickBooks is recommending printing a report instead, so let's just cancel that. And clicking vendor info will show the vendor record of the currently selected transaction. One thing I want to point out is that you can edit the selected transaction. If you choose that, QuickBooks opens the transaction. And if you've made any payments on a bill, you can actually change the amount due. And I want to mention what's going on behind the scenes here. If you reduce the bill amount, QuickBooks creates a credit with the vendor you overpaid. If you increase the bill amount, QuickBooks considers the bill partially paid and it shows up in the unpaid bills list. Let's go ahead and close this. And let's go back to the vendors list here, and just like the customer center, if you right-click a name, you can delete a vendor, but if that vendor has transactions associated with them, you can't delete them, but you can make them inactive, and that will hide them from the list. Okay, so that's it for the vendor center.